Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Mike again. So I just wanted to follow up on my last video in that I'm really trying to zero in on logotherapy. I had written a book for the average person, not necessarily a therapist or even someone in therapy or coaching, called a Higher Purpose. And it is not exclusively logotherapy, but I refer to it as the missing piece. And what I mean by that is there are so many people who have all the things that we aspire to. I'm thinking of famous people, celebrities, sports people, right? They have money, fame, power, especially in the fields of entertainment. They're very physically attractive. They have it all. And so many commit crimes, turn to drugs or alcohol, self-harm. Why? What is going on here? I contend that despite all the external successes, they don't have that internal meaning and purpose. I think that's what's missing. By the way, that's incidentally why people, for example, who find themselves in very difficult circumstances, I mentioned Christopher Reeve or Stephen Hawking or some other people, and they go on and they achieve some happiness and meaning in their life. And I think it's because of that they have meaning, that every day they get up, they feel like they are contributing to the world. They're making the world a better place. And that's why Nietzsche famously said, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." So I think very often when things don't seem to be going people's way, and despite achieving all the things they wanted to achieve, they're still not happy, they're still not fulfilled. And I think meaning, which is what logotherapy is all about, is the missing piece. And so I really wanted to, over the past several years, incorporate this meaning into my work. Not just changing thoughts and behaviors, which is very important, it's cognitive behavioral therapy. Not just providing a space where people felt safe and understood and non-judged and accepted, although very important. And not just having a immediate goal or objective, improving their communication, being more assertive, right? But actually adding that purpose and meaning to their lives, living a life congruent with their values and who they are as human beings and who they want to be as human beings. So this then begs the question. Dr. Frankl and logotherapy kind of has three assumptions, three tenets of the theory. One is that there is meaning in life, right? That human life has meaning, period. It's not objective, it's not subjective, it's an objective. Human life has meaning. That people have a will to meaning. They have a drive to find meaning and purpose in their lives. So there is an inherent meaning in human life. And human beings are driven to find that meaning and purpose. And finally, a freedom of will. That means that we can choose to pursue that drive. We do have this drive and we can act on it. We can choose to do things that find that meaning, that uncover that meaning, that create that meaning. So the question then becomes, if human life does have inherent meaning, and if we have a will to meaning, a drive to find or uncover or create that meaning, why don't we? Why is that not the default state of human beings? It's almost as if some people have said from an evolutionary perspective, evolutionary psychology, why do we tend not to be optimistic? Why do people tend to be so pessimistic? And there does seem to be a theory. The theory is that evolution's goal is for survival. And pessimism keeps us safe. If we assume everything can hurt us, we're right. Well, let me make a correction. 100,000 years ago, as we were evolving, if we thought everything in the world could hurt us, we were correct. Right? Back then, that was true. Today, fortunately, it does not. But we evolved to be pessimists because it was a survival mechanism. It helped us survive. If you were walking in the woods and you heard a noise behind the bushes or the trees, if you assumed that it was a saber-toothed tiger and you were wrong, at worst you felt foolish. On the other hand, if you were right, you just saved your life. On the other hand, if you assumed that it was a rabbit and you were right, then it was a rabbit. But if you assumed it was a rabbit and you were wrong and it was a saber-toothed tiger, you were dead. So as between the two, from an evolutionary perspective, for a survival perspective, it is better to assume the worst. Because if you are right and you run away, you've saved your life. If you're wrong and it wasn't something bad, you just feel a little foolish running away. So that is the kind of evolutionary biology behind, or the evolutionary theory behind, why we tend to be more pessimistic. And again, I think it's a good theory. It's a good theory to explain why we tend to be more pessimistic, why we tend to assume the worst, why with cognitive behavioral therapy we tend to think more negatively and positively, right? Because it's more protective. It kind of guards us. The problem is, from evolutionary perspective, evolution cares about survival, does not care about our happiness. We care about our happiness. So similarly, if we do have a will to meaning, if we have a drive to find meaning, and there is in fact meaning, why isn't that our default state, right? Why isn't optimism our default state? Well, because of evolution. For survival, it's better to be a pessimist. Okay, got that. But if we have a drive for meaning and a will to meaning as human beings, and that's not our default state, and it doesn't seem to be, why not? What's going on there? And the reasons are not very clear. It could be that thinking in big picture, meaning of life, might distract us from day-to-day survival. If we're thinking big picture, right, and we're neglecting day-to-day, perhaps that could be a reason. But whatever the reason, that muscle, that innate desire and drive to find meaning and purpose, doesn't seem to be the default state. And so what I'm trying to do with Logotherapy 2.0 is, as therapists and coaches, it's our job to help stimulate that drive, that will, because it does not seem to be self-motivating, right? There is meaning in human existence, in human life, and we do have a drive and a desire and a will to have meaning and purpose in our life. So why doesn't that click in automatically? Again, it's not entirely clear, but what is clear is it doesn't. And many things over the centuries and millennia, including religion and more spiritual aspects, have kicked in to provide that meaning. Also family, right? So I think our job as logotherapists, or people incorporating logotherapy, is to re-trigger, re-stimulate that drive or that will to meaning. And the way we do that is through the Socratic Dereflection Dialogue. When a person is coming to us, a client, a coachee, and they're talking to us about a problem, we want to focus on what is the ultimate meaning that they can derive from whatever adversity they're facing. Right? So they may have a problem, and we want to know what the problem is, but what is the purpose behind the emotion or the behavior or the thoughts that we're having? So if we're anxious, what's the behavior, what's the purpose behind the anxiety? Is it protective, to protect us from something? If we worry about it, if we over-prepare, if we avoid it, maybe we're trying to protect ourselves. Depression, right? The purpose, right? If we're feeling like we failed in some way, or we've lost, or we're in an undeserved situation, what's the purpose of that emotion? If we tend to withdraw and isolate because we're depressed, what's the purpose behind that? Right? If we're angry and we go on the attack, or we're passive aggressive, right? What's the purpose behind that feeling and those behaviors? And then the thoughts, right? Nobody likes me, I'm never going to get anywhere. What's the point? Is it to kind of protect ourselves from failure? Like if we assume we're going to fail this way, if we do, it doesn't hurt as much. Trying to find the purpose, and then, and what's the purpose or positive intent behind those thoughts, behaviors, and feelings? And then is there a deeper meaning, right? Is that congruent with our values, right? Is the positive intent or purpose of those emotions, behaviors, and thoughts connected with our values? We value our reputation, having a work ethic, being responsible, having a good reputation, holding ourselves to a high standard, showing and demonstrating how much we care about people. And what is the deeper meaning that we can find in that? And so again, the discussion is the first two tenets of logotherapy, that human life does have inherent meaning, check, and that human beings have a drive or will to meaning, check. And that drive and will is somehow atrophied, it's weakened, and so this Socratic Dereflection Dialogue is designed to strengthen that. So focus on meaning and purpose and values, right? Taking it outside of ourselves and putting it to what is the bigger meaning, bigger purpose that's at play here. And most of the session is just focusing on that. So it starts to stimulate and trigger that it's all about meaning. It's all about purpose. Whatever we're going through, meaning. That's really what it's about. You know, it's similar in some ways to in-person-centered, where you create an environment that is conducive for change. That's what you do. You create an environment. You listen. You're connected. You're congruent. You're authentic. You're non-judgmental. And you've got to kind of, if you start to find yourself drifting to not being congruent, you got to come back. And if you're not being authentic, you got to come back. And if you're judging, stop judging. And if you can maintain that space, the focus is on the necessary and sufficient conditions for growth to occur. Similarly, in solution-focused therapy, the goal is the outcome. What's the solution? Where do we want to go? We know what the problem is. The problem's over here. People have been spending their whole life focusing on the problem. But this is where we want to get to, the solution, the outcome. So the focus is outcome-based. All right? Whatever the problem is, that's what the problem is. But what do you want to feel, do, think instead? Let's focus on that. Let's trigger that part of the brain, the problem-solving part. Same thing with logotherapy. Let's focus on the meaning, the purpose, the values. That becomes the bulk of the therapy. To strengthen that muscle, to catapult the client into a different way of thinking, right? And that is what I'm calling this, the Socratic Dereflection Dialogue. Now, there is the third part, and that is the freedom of will, which is then, that's the interventions. That's, okay, so we're talking meaning, right? That's the whole focus of therapy is that's what we talk about. Wherever the client goes, we try to bring it back to what's the meaning, what's the purpose, right? What are the values that this is implicating? But then at some point, and that, by the way, by itself can help people discover what they can do on their own. But as part of the therapy, we can also engage in techniques from logotherapy, the paradoxical intention, cognitive behavioral therapy, identifying and disputing negative, distorted thoughts, right? Behavioral activation, doing things that we did when we were happy and positive, right? And at a more macro level, volunteering, connecting with family more. So that is the other part. So the actions, the interventions that are most like assignments, exercises, homework, that's designed to do the third part, right? The freedom of will, doing something. But the first two are the conversation. And I think that's an important concept for us to get as logotherapists. Anyway, I hope this was clear. I hope this was somewhat helpful, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you.